Yes, check. Check YouTube. How may I hide this? Private. Are you guys hearing me?
Yes, Mrs. Working.
Alright, thank you. Alright, okay. Oh, that means that I might think I know what was the issue. Alright, so that means I have to go back on textbook. Alright.
Yes, Mrs. Working on YouTube.
Tell them.
Oh, Miss, Taylor is a classmate of mine. Could you allow her to join, please?
No, I don't know
Okay.
her.
So I'll send the YouTube link to her.
Yes. Me tell them if don't send out my Google Meet link. Wanna hear? Wanna not listen? Wanna make me change the link pound again, you know?
I'm sorry.
Stop send out the Google. Wanna can't read. Let me write it again. Deny. Tell her to stop requesting me because me not gonna accept her. And because of that, me I make one new link. Give me a second. Where it is? Google Germ. New link coming through because you no listen. Guys, I'm making a new link, so delete that. Soon up. New link. This I get delete. Sorry for the long wait. Wait on L.T.S students to join back the meeting. Hello. Anyways, we're going to start, and we're going to start now. Anyways, um, so where we were at nine. So what I was saying before, but you guys weren't hearing me, is that in LTS we are hosting schedule classes, and in our schedule classes we would have completed from chapter 1 to 10. So in today's marathon, we're hoping to complete chapter 2. We're hoping to complete chapter 11, and maybe today, hopefully we can do that. So now we're going to start the chapter of movement. So what is movement? Movement is a change in the position of a whole organism or of parts of an organism. When it comes to movement, guess what? There are 3 types of movement. What we have? We have a growth movement, we have a part movement, and we have a whole body movement or locomotion. What is growth movement? So growth movement has to deal with the plant growth or the growth of plants. But when we talk about plant growth, what do we mean? So guess what? We mean that shoots grow and bend towards light, while roots grow and bend downward with the pull of gravity. What I recommend you guys knowing is what is locomotion. Some locomotion is the movement of the entire body from one place to another. And the last but not least, but part movement has to deal with a part of a plant or a sedentary animal. So let's go down to human skeleton. Humans have a endoskeleton. And what is the endoskeleton? So the endoskeleton basically lies inside the body, and it is surrounded by muscles. The skeleton is held together by joints and a tough elastic called ligaments. The ligaments is made of bone and cartilage. Let's talk. What's the difference between bone and cartilage? So bone is composed of living cells surrounded by non-living material, while cartilage is composed of living cells surrounded by mainly collagen fibers. Again, what's the difference between bones and cartilage? Bones are composed of living cells surrounded by non-living materials, while cartilage is composed of living cells surrounded by mainly collagen fibers. So the both of them is surrounded by living. The both of them composed of living cells, but the only thing different is that one is surrounded by non-living material, and one is surrounded by collagen fibers. Cartilage, C for cartilage, C for collagen, and then we have bone to non-living. Let's start. There are two types of skeleton. What we have? We have an axial skeleton, we have an appendicular skeleton. And when we talk about it, the axial skeleton is made up of three parts. We have a skull, we have a vertebral column, and we have a ribs and sternum. What is the skull made up of? The skull is made up of the cranium, the upper and lower jaw. The vertebral column is composed of 33 bones, and the 33 bones are known as the vertebrae. Then we have the ribs are attached to the vertebral column, and basically dorsally, and then to the sternum. Now we're talking about the diagram, how to label this. So the first part of everything we have what is the appendicular skeleton composed of. So it's composed of our pectoral girdle, a pelvic girdle, arms, and legs. Arms and legs. So guess what? At the top of the at the top of the little diagram, we have the pectoral girdle. Then that's on your left hand side. Then we have the pelvic girdle. Then what separates them both is a ball and socket joint. At the top of the thigh, you have the femur. At the lower section, you have the what? The humerus. What separates the thigh from the leg is a joint called the hinge joint. Then we have what? Then in the leg we have a let's label the leg. It's time to label the leg. On the left hand side of the leg, the upper part of the leg is up there is called the radius. The lower part on the left hand side is called the ulna. On the right hand side, the upper, the tibia, the lower, the fibula. Now let's talk about the bones inside the hand and the fingers and the foot bones and the toes. Guess what? No. So the wrist bones are known as what? The carpals. Then the hand bones are known as the metacarpals. And then the finger bones are known as what? The phalanges. Get next. We have the ankle bones are known as the tarsals. Then the foot bones are known as the metatarsals. And then the toe bones are known as the phalanges. Um, YouTube is working now. Alright, so the next section is the so when you talk about the girdles, so the girdles connect the limbs to the axial skeleton. Then the limbs are composed of long bones that have joints between to allow for easy movement. Now let's go into what's the function of the human skeleton. So one, protection for internal organs. Two, support for the soft parts of the body. Three, movement. Four, manufacture of the red blood cells. So, what functions of the human skeleton? One, protection for the internal organs. Two, support for the soft parts of the body. Three, movement. And four, manufacture of the red blood cells. No, manufacture of the blood cells. Movement in humans. So when it comes to movement, you have different types of it takes place within joints. So movement in humans is brought about by the skeletal muscles working across the joints. And when it comes to joints in the human body, there are many types of joints. Some of them are called a hinge joint, ball and socket. Hinge joints comes under the type of movable joints or synovial joints. Then we have partially movable joints or cartilaginous joints. Then we have immovable joints or fibrous joints. So, what is fibrous joints? These joints basically are joints firmed together by fibers allowing no movement. So, the cranium is made up of several bones that are immovable. And then we have the partially movable joints or cartilaginous joints. They basically know they're separated by cartilage pads. And if it's a partially movable, obviously, then there's slight movement within the joint. And these partially movable joints can be found in the vertebrae. Hence why you see a spine move a little bit. Then we have movable or synovial joints. And these joints basically they have articulating surfaces and they're covered with articular cartilage and they're separated by a synovial fluid. These bones basically are held together by ligaments. And if they're held together by ligaments are tough and elastic, then that means this allow the bones to prevent dislocation as well as to allow movement of the joints. Then the types of movable joints are as follows. Hinge joints, that's one. Ball and socket joints, that's two. So what is hinge joints? Hinge joints are basically formed when the ends of bones meet and they allow movement in one plane. And ball and socket now is where a ball at the end of one bone fits into a socket in the other bone. And they allow movement in all planes. So hinge joints are formed when the ends of bones meet. They allow movement in only one plane, while ball and socket are formed where a ball at the end of one bone fits into a socket in the other bone. They allow movement in all planes. Example of hinge joints is the knee, the elbow, the finger, the toe joint. Example of ball and socket is the shoulder and the hip. Hence why females maybe can move them hip round and round. Everybody understand, right? Everybody following so far? Google Meet. So now we have. Alright, so now we're moving on to tendons. So we have what are tendons? So tendons are attached these muscles to the bones of the skeleton, and then also tendons are tough and elastic. So tendons are tough and non-elastic. So ligaments are elastic while tendons are non-elastic. Alright. Alright, so now let's talk about the action of movable joints. So when you hear about the term the action of you're talking about you're talking about when one muscle contract what's happening. You're talking about the difference between contracts and relaxes. So when a muscle contracts, it exerts a pull, but it cannot exert a push when it relaxes. So and in other words, you can say that two muscles are always needed to produce. Two muscles are always needed to produce movement at a movable joint, and these are known as the antagonistic pair. And then when a muscle bends, the joint bends the joint, it contracts, and that is called the flexor muscle. In other words, let's say, so when a muscle bends and then it contracts, that's called the flexor muscle. But when it's straightened and then it contracts, it's called the extensor muscle. When it bends and contracts, flexor. When it's straightened and contracts, extensor. Now we have the movement of the human forward climb. So let's talk about biceps, triceps. Biceps is the flexor muscle. Triceps is the extensor muscle. Get that? So again, if you want me to repeat, how comes you have a flexor muscle is when the muscle bends at the joint and then contracts. And then how you have the extensor is when it straightens the joint and then it contracts. Same thing with biceps and triceps. Biceps is a flexor muscle, triceps is an extensor muscle. Alright, importance of locomotion in animal, and I urge you guys to know it. Alright, so the importance of locomotion is 1, for the search for food, 2, search for a mate, 3, escape from predators, 4, distribute their offspring. Also, the reason why animals move is also to A, prevent overcrowding, 2, B, avoid danger, C, avoid waste products, D, avoid harsh environmental conditions, and E, colonize new habitats. So again, remember, Locomotion has to deal with the movement of animals from one place to another. So therefore, if locomotion is that, I urge you guys to know about the difference between the importance of locomotion in animals. Because once you know that, you're good to go. Okay, you know. So the importance again: search for food, search for a mate, escape from predators, distribute their offspring. And then they also move if a place is off to prevent overcrowding, to avoid danger, to avoid their waste products, to avoid harsh environmental conditions, colonize new habitats. Now we have completed this the section, the chapter of um movement. We're now going to go into the chapter of irritability. All right, so what is irritability? So irritability has to deal with stimulus, response, receptor. So what is a stimulus? A stimulus is basically a change in the internal environment of an organism that initiates a response. What's a response? A response is a change in an organism which is brought about by a stimulus. What's a receptor? It's a part of the organism that detects the stimulus. What's an effector? Effector is a part of an organism that responds to the stimulus. So now let's talk about the in animals, the muscles and glands are effectors. In plants, the region just behind the tip of the roots, the petioles, are known as the effectors. So let's talk about the responses of green plants to stimuli. As I said before, it's I urge you guys to know the plant-based aspect for your biology exam tomorrow, because you know bio is mostly plant-based. So, what the part movement? So the changes in the turgidity of the cells about many part movement. This important. So when it comes to the turgidity, so for example, if the leaves of some plants is touched or strong-willed by falling, it protects them from damage. So leaves will protect some plants from becoming damaged. Then leaves respond to changing light intensity by falling at night as well as opening in the morning to access light for photosynthesis. And then flowers respond to light intensity by opening in the morning to expose the stamens and carpels in for pollination and closing at night. So let's talk about it now. So flowers change them light intensity. So for example, in the morning they will open. They're open. They expose the stamen and the carpels to the light. Basically, they open up those for pollination, and in the night it will close. The leaves now would basically fall at night but open in the morning to access light for photosynthesis. And the leaves now help the plants to basically the leaves now will fall, so it protects the plants from being damaged. Now, as we talked about before in the previous chapter about the growth movement, so the growth movement of plants. So as we stated before, shoot grow and bend towards light, and then roots grow and bend downwards with the pull of gravity. And what's the function of shoot? What's the function of a shoot? So basically, the shoot now they maximize the amount of light they have available for photosynthesis, right? And then when they grow upwards, it helps the flowers, or they help the flowers to remain in the best position for pollination. And then when the roots now grow downwards, it allows the roots to maximize the amount of water they can obtain for photosynthesis. So the stimulus and light. So basically, when it comes to light, the response most move away from light into darkness. The response aids survival, make organism harder to be seen by predators. Moisture, most move away from dry areas into areas with moisture. And then, how is the response aid survival? Most desiccation drying out, especially if the organism do not have waterproof body coverings. Temperature, move away from very low or very high temperatures, prevents extreme of temperature affecting enzymes ability. Chemicals, move towards giving off by body away from harmful chemicals, then enables organisms to find food, which is essential for survival, and avoid being harmed by chemicals such as pesticides. Then touch, move or curl up if touch, helps the organism escape from predators or give protection against predators. Now we're moving on to nervous system. In the humans, there are two types of nervous system. What are they? So we have a central nervous system and we have a peripheral nervous system. So we have a peripheral nervous system. So the central nervous system consists of the brain and spinal cord, as well as the peripheral nervous system consists of the cranial and spinal nerves. Now, what? So now let's talk about the neurons. So for the CNA, for the peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system, it's made up of neurons. And what is the function of the neurons? So they transmit messages called nerve impulses, and then they have all neurons don't have a cell body with fibers of cytoplasm extending from it called nerve fibers. So there are three types of neurons. You have a sensory neuron, a motor neuron, a relay or intermediate neurons. I urge you guys to know the main function of the main diagram for the neurons. So you know where is the receptor is, where is the myelin sheath, or the dendrite, where is the cell body or the axon. I urge you guys to know them. So this is an example for the sensory neuron. Next one is the same goes for the motor neuron. Urge you guys to know, where are the different stuff for it. And as well as how to draw them, like how to sketch them, because you don't know. You know where the dendrite is on this one for the motor neuron, know where the myelin sheath is, know where the axon is, know where the effector is. Then I urge you guys to know, yeah, and that's basically it. Receptor and effector, not a must. All right. So, all right, let's talk about the relay neuron. So, the relay neuron is let's talk about the simplex reflex action. So, the simplex reflex action is basically a rapid, automatic, involuntary response to a stimulus by a muscle or gland. Example, the automatic withdrawal of the hand when it touches a hot object. So, for example, so now we have a receptor which detects the stimulus, a sensor neuron which carries the impulse to the central nervous system, a relay neuron in the central nervous system which carries the impulse to a motor neuron, and the motor neuron which carries the impulse away from the central nervous system, and an effector which responds to the stimulus. I urge you guys to know the process. So it goes from the receptor to the sensory neuron to the relay neuron to the motor neuron, then to the effector. Receptor, sensory neuron, relay neuron, motor, then effector. So again, the process of that is the motor neuron, the receptor to the sensory neuron to the relay neuron to the motor neuron to the last one, which is the effector. Now we're going to the human brain. So when it comes to the human brain, the three main regions are a cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the medulla. So the three main regions of our human brain is the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the medulla. What is some of the psychological aspects of drug abuse? You know, CSEC love carry this. Maybe this is at the human aspect of bias. Sometimes they carry it in like section C or section D. So I urge you guys to know it. So some of the short-term effects of alcohol is like, for example, drowsiness, memory losses, blurred vision, slurred speech, impaired mental functioning, impaired muscular skills, loss of consciousness, increased urine production leading to dehydration. The long-term effects would be long-term memory loss, increased blood pressure causing heart disease, heart attack, and stroke, inflammation of the stomach walls, stomach ulcers, and other intestinal disorders, inflammation of the stomach walls, fatty liver disease, alcohol, hepatitis, cirrhosis, nervous system disorder, brain damage as brain cells dies, cancer of the mouth, throat, and esophagus, as well as body tremors, anxiety, and hallucinations. The abuse of cocaine. So when you talk about cocaine, you will have cocaine can cause the following. So schizophrenia and mental disorders, constriction of blood vessels which increases the blood pressure, damage to the lungs and nasal passages, loss of appetite, as well as paranoid anxiety and depression, increased breathing rates and heart rate, reduced need for sleep, damage to lungs and nasal passages, as well as the feelings of well-being, increased energy, alertness, confidence, and power. So the abuse of prescription drugs. So there are many prescription drugs that people abuse, which means they overdose themselves with it. And we call some of them, either you have diet pills as well as antibiotics as well as tranquilizers. So tranquilizers are used to treat anxiety and insomnia. And when you abuse it, it can lead to slurred speech, poor muscular coordination, as well as dizziness or sleepiness. Antibiotics are used to treat bacterial infections, and overuse or taking an incomplete course of antibiotics can lead to the development of antibiotic resistant strain of bacteria. As well as diet pills. Diet pills are used to lose weight. Abuse of diet pills can lead to nervousness, dizziness, anxiety, difficulty sleeping, diarrhea, stomach pain, high blood pressure, a fast of irregular heartbeat, heart palpitations, and heart failure. So in society we have basically we have a lot of stuff, social and economic effects of drug abuse. And basically some of these are: prostitution exposes abusers to STIs, as well as the cost to society of drug abuse in general is high, as resources have to be used to treat and rehabilitate drug addicts. As well as drug abuse upset relationships with family and friends and leads to personal neglect, accident, job loss, as the abusers are unable to work, financial problems, increased crime, or even prostitution. Prostitution, as the abuser has to find money to pay for the drugs. So social effects of drug abuse would be like they can't the drug abusers are usually unemployed. They are usually prostitution expose abusers to STIs, as well as the resources to treat drug abuse is not that high. Basically, drug abuse allow people to be convicted in prisons, as well as people who do illegal drugs, they're convicted and in prison. As well as it allow them to lose family members. It allows them to neglect their personal life. It allows them to meet in car accidents. It allows them to basically do increased crime. It allows them to go into prostitution. Now we're going into the human eye. Feel like this one comes tomorrow. Please know how to label the table. So when it comes to the human eye, we can talk about the eye detects light, and it has been reflected from an object, and it converts it to nerve impulses. So ensure you know how to label the eye. So you have the conjunctiva, then you have the cornea. Normally, the most ones that CSEC will ask you for is where the iris is, where the pupil is, where the lens, where's the cornea, where's the conjunctiva, where's the sclera, where's the fovea, where's the retina, the optic nerve, and even the blind spot. So ensure you know where these are the main parts. So you know the blind spot is somewhere right there, up above the optic nerve. Then the retina is like little bit above the blind spot. Then the sclera is basically the outer layer of the something that where is a white section but is the outer layer. Then we have the pupil is like that. The pupil is like right there. The lens is the big circle. The pupil is the area where yes the opening. And the iris is now where hold the pupil together. Yes, so and then the cornea is basically where you have below, it's basically below the iris, so right there. So, and then the conjunctiva would be the outer layer that looks like a little heart C shape like. So the retina is composed of two types of specialized cells, sensitive cells or photoreceptors. One second. So now we have the retina is composed of two specialized light cells or the photoreceptors, and these are known as the rods and the cones. So the rods function in low light intensity and the cone function in high light intensities. So what is the rod responsible for? So they're responsible for detecting brightness of light and locate around the sides of the retina, and then the cones are responsible for detecting color and fine detail. Alright, so now we're going to jump to this section. Alright, so when somebody is short-sighted, is also known as myopia. So when somebody is short-sighted, it's also known as myopia. And basically a person with short sight can see near objects, but they can't see far objects, distant objects. So this means that the objects focus in front of the retina. So this means that the short sight person, if the eyeball is too long from front to back, it or if the lens is too curved, which is thick. So, in order to correct a short-sighted person, which is that person who has myopia, then you give them they wear divergent or concave lenses as spectacles or contact lenses. So again, another term for short-sightedness is myopia. This means that a person can see near, but they can't see distance. And it simply means that their eyeball is too long from front to back, as well as their lens is too curved. And in order to correct them, you give them diverging concave lens or spectacles, or concave lenses as spectacles or contact lenses. Then the next thing you have is long sight, which is also known as hypermetropia. And it means that a person with long sight can see distant objects, but near objects are out of focus. So they can see far distance objects, but they can't see near objects. And what does this mean? It means that their eyeball is too short and their lens is too flat. In other words, just like how in short-sightedness, the lens would be thick, the lens will be curved and thick. In farsightedness, then the lens is flat and thin. Can be corrected by converging convex lenses as spectacles or contact lenses. So while myopia can be corrected by wearing diverging concave lenses, then hypermetropia can be corrected by wearing converging convex lenses. Now the next section we have is the human skin. So what is the skin? So the skin is basically the largest organ in the body, and it has three types of layers. We have an epidermis, a dermis, and a subcutaneous layer. The epidermis is the outermost layer of the skin. The dermis is below the epidermis, and the subcutaneous layer is the bottom layer made up of fat cells. So I urge you guys to know this diagram, know where the dermis is, know where the subcutaneous layer is, know where the epidermis is, know where the hair and the hair follicle is. You know the hair is a long, then whatever holds the hair would be the hair follicle. Know where the subcutaneous layer is basically where you have the little dots. Know where the sebaceous layer is, and it's basically secretes oil to keep the skin and the hair soft. Know where the capillary network is, and know where the sweat pore is. So, and know where the sweat pore is, know the function, know where the sweat gland is, the sweat pore, the sebaceous gland, the epidermis, the dermis, the subcutaneous layer, the hair follicle, the hair, and at the end of the time, when you finish, when you know all entry, you know the functions. So you know the function of the sebaceous gland would be to secrete oil to keep the skin and the hair soft. And you know that the subcutaneous layer is the bottom layer, which has the fat cells. So see them there? Look at something that will look like egg. Subcutaneous layer. Epidermis in the middle. Epidermis upper. Hair follicle is what holding the hair. The hair is the long something will go up in the ear. Sebaceous gland is basically look at something will look like egg where they will hang off the hair. The sweat pore is basically the long thing that goes down into the skin. And then the sweat duct is basically going down into is the long cord. And then the gland is basically the good tie off there. So it will look like a ball or yarn. And the capillary network is something that look like penis. Anyways. Skin and temperature regulation. So the skin and the temperature regulation. So when it comes to the skin and the temperature regulation, it has something called homeostasis. And homeostasis is the maintenance of a constant internal environment. All right. So now what I recommend you guys to know now is this section. is the section between vasodilation and vasoconstriction. And please know between these stuff. So when the body temperature rises above 37 degrees Celsius, sweating occurs, vasodilation occurs, hair erector muscles relax. When the body temperature drops below 37 degrees Celsius, sweating stop, vasoconstriction occurs, hair erector muscle contract. So when it means by sweating occurs, it means the secretory cells in the sweat glands absorb water, urea salts from the blood passing through them, forming sweat. What is vasodilation? I recommend you guys know the difference. So vasodilation is the arterioles and the capillaries in the dermis of the skin dilate, so more blood flows through them and heat is lost to the environment from the blood. So basically, it is when the arterioles and the capillaries they basically dilate, and when they dilate, blood flows through them, and then when blood flows through them, more heat is lost and to the environment from the blood. Now, when it comes to the vasoconstriction, is when the arterioles and the capillaries now constrict, and then little blood flows through them, and very little heat is lost. And basically, the heat is retained in the body to basically keep the body warm or keep the body cool. So again, what is vasodilation? Is basically the arterioles and the capillaries in the dermis of the skin dilate, so more blood flows through them, and more heat is lost to the environment from the blood. What is vasoconstriction? Arterioles and capillaries in the dermis of the skin constrict. Therefore, what? Little blood flows through them and little heat is lost. Heat is retained to keep the body cool. Let's talk about the hair erector muscle relaxes. This causes the hairs to lie flat, and then the hair erector muscle contracts. This causes the hair to stand up and trap a layer of hair next to the skin to act as insulation. So when the hair erector muscle relax, they cause the hair to lie flat. So no insulating layer of hair is created. But when the temperature drops below 37 degrees, then we know that the hair erector muscles contract, which means that the hairs stand up and they trap a layer of hair next to the skin to act as insulation. That's why they always say the longer your hair is, the hotter you are. Because your hair keep you warm. That's why people in the cold countries always have long hairs, or them always grow their hair. All right. So what's the function of the skin? We're talking. So the function of the skin, the epidermis protect against the entry of pathogen. The epidermis protect against water loss by evaporation from body fluids. The epidermis protects against the sun harmful ultraviolet rays. The epidermis protects against harmful chemicals in the environment. The subcutaneous layer protects against heat loss in low environmental temperatures, and the subcutaneous layer protects against damage by acting as padding. So the epidermis protects against the entry of pathogen. Again, the epidermis protects against the water loss by evaporation from body fluids. The epidermis protects against the sun harmful ultraviolet ray. the rays. The epidermis protects against harmful chemicals in the environment. The subcutaneous layer protects against heat loss in low environmental temperatures, and the subcutaneous layer protects against damage by acting as padding. Now let's talk about skincare. So when it comes to skincare, it is said that we should use warm water, which helps to remove natural oils from the body. We should use more mild cleansers, for example, avoid the use of strong soaps and to remove natural oils. Then pat the skin dry so that some moisture remains, and also apply sunscreen to prevent against ultraviolet rays. Avoid skincare products containing alcohol, which has drying effect, as well as use skincare products that contain natural ingredients, and avoid skincare products that has synthetic chemical ingredients. Skin bleaching. So, what is skin bleaching? It basically refers to the practice of using chemical substances to lighten skin tone or to provide an even skin complexion by reducing the production of melanin in areas of abnormal pigmentation. Example: moles, birthmarks, and other dark patches. So, what is skin bleaching? It's a practice of using chemical substances to lighten skin tone or to provide an even skin complexion by reducing the production of melanin in areas of abnormal pigmentation. Example: moles, birthmarks, and other dark patches. And now we have come to the end of chapter 12. We're now going into chapter 30, which is great. Jordan, are you following?
Yes.
So, what is growth? So, growth is the permanent increase in size of a organism. All right, so there are so no, yeah. So germination. So what is germination? Germination is the process by which embryonic plant in a seed grows into a seedling. So germination is basically the process by which embryonic plant in a seed grows into a seedling. Recommend that you guys do the how to label a dicotyledonous seed. And the top part is a pumule right there. So we have the little leaf something. No, like right there. So the embryonic shoot. Then the radicle is the embryonic root. Then you have the micropyle. Then you have the testa. Then you have the two cotyledons. Recommend. So again, you have the pumule, which is the embryonic shoot. Then you have the radicle, which is the embryonic root. Then you have the micropyle, then you have the testa, then you have the two cotyledons. All right. So, what is required in order to grow? For there are three conditions required to for seeds to germinate. And what are these? We have the water, we have oxygen, we have a suitable temperature. So why? Basically because you need the water to activate the enzyme so that chemical reactions can occur. You need oxygen because of aerobic respiration to what? Produce energy. And you need what? A suitable temperature, usually between 5 degrees Celsius and 40 degrees Celsius to what? Activate the enzymes. It can be higher than 40 degrees Celsius because you know what will happen when the enzymes will become denatured. Because enzymes can only function in a particular temperature. All right. That was the end of chapter 13 module. We're now going into chapter 14. What? And it is now the reproduction module. Our reproduction chapter. So, what is reproduction? Reproduction is the process by which So reproduction is a process by which living organisms generate new individuals of the same kind. There are two types of reproduction. What we have an asexual and we have a sexual. What is asexual reproduction? So asexual reproduction involves one parent and offspring and is produced by mitosis. Sexual reproduction involves two parents, and which means gametes or sex cells are produced in reproduction. Asexual reproduction involves only one parent, and offsprings are produced by mitosis. Reproduction involves two parents, gametes or sex cells are producing reproductive organs by meiosis. So let's talk about it. So when a male and a female gamete fuse together during fertilization, it forms a single cell called a zygote. But the zygote divides by mitosis to form an embryo, and then it ultimately becomes an adult. And then each offspring usually have some form of receive some form of genes from both parents, and they possess some form of characteristics from both parents. This is known as variation. So sexual reproduction. Not sexual. Difference between sexual reproduction is and asexual reproduction. So for sexual reproduction, the process is rapid because you don't need to find a mate in order to produce gametes. For asexual reproduction, I'm gonna say for sexual reproduction, the process is slow because you have to find a mate in order for you to produce gametes and for fertilization to occur. For asexual reproduction, there's no form of variation. All the offsprings are identical. For sexual reproduction, it produces variation because offsprings are not identical. Then for offspring, for asexual variation, offspring usually remain close to the parents, which increase the chance of overcrowding and competitions. And then for sexual reproduction, offsprings are usually dispersed over a wide area, which reduce the chance of overcrowding and competition. Many plants uses both methods of reproduction, thus combining the advantage of both. Many species of grass produce asexually by producing runners and sexually by producing flowers and seed. Asexual reproduction does not allow species to change and adapt to changing conditions. It is beneficial in a stable, unchanging environment or in an uncrowded environment. Sexual reproduction enables species to change and adapt to changing conditions. It is beneficial in an unstable, changing environment or in an overcrowded environment. All right, next one. So we're going into female reproductive system. So what is female reproductive system? So we have a female reproductive are called ova, and they're producing two ovaries which form part of the female reproductive system. So the female gametes are called the ova, as well as, and they're produced in two ovaries. The male gametes are called the sperm, and they're produced in the testes. And then the testes is located in the scrotum. Recommend you guys know how to label this diagram, the vagina diagram, as well as so you know that the vagina is usually the outer layer. The cervix is a little bit above the two lips them. It look like it has something. You know, look at lines them on it. That's the when look at something will look like muscles, that's the cervix. Then the uterus wall is like look at two look lip them. So yes, the two look outer layer them will look like lips. And then the uterus lining is basically there's the one is basically inside of the uterus wall, and then the uterus is basically inside of where the area inside of the fallopian tube or the oviduct, but it's the area that is the triangular way. Alright, so now let's talk about the diagram. So when you look at that, the first thing you need to look at is the urethra. The urethra usually is the card. Then the penis would be the lower layer that's down behind the urethra. And then the testes is the testes would be the circle thing, because those are the area that produces the sperm. Then whatever is holding the testes would be known as what? The scrotum or the scrotal sac right there. The seminal vessel would be up there. The epidermis will be the little thing that is like some soft something that's holding the sperm. So ensure you guys know that diagram. Now let's talk about the production of the ova. So each female birth many thousand premature ova, and each is basically surrounded by a fluid spill which forms a primary follicle, and then each month between puberty at about 11 to 13 years old, menopause happens at around 40 to 50 years old, the immature ovum will develop into a mature ovum. uh, in a woman's lifetime, they're supposed to produce over about 450 immature ova will ever mature. So immature is basically how many eggs a woman produce in her lifetime. And to produce a mature ovum, the immature ovum undergoes meiosis. One basically what the four cells produce develop into a mature ovum which is released during ovulation. So in order for you to produce a mature ovum, it has to undergo meiosis. Because you know that sexual reproduction takes place via meiosis, and sexual reproduction takes place via meiosis, and asexual takes place via mitosis. Then let's talk about the production of the sperm. So sperm are produced continuously from puberty in the semen. The semiferous tubules of the testes. Cells in the tubules wall undergo meiosis, and all the cells produce into mature sperm. These are stored in the epidermis until ejaculation. So the epidermis stores the sperm. The testes is the one that is the sperm. So basically, the sperm is produced in the testes, the epidermis store the sperm, the male gametes are known as the sperm, as well as the testes are located outside the scrotum. So again, the testes produce the sperm is produced in the testes. Then the testes is located outside the scrotum, and then the epidermis stores the sperm. Next section is the menstrual cycle. So the menstrual cycle is a cycle of about 28 days comprising two main events. So we have the ovulation and the menstruation. So what is menstruation? Menstruation is basically the loss of the uterus lining from the body. And this starts to occur about 14 days after ovulation if fertilization has not occurred. And the ovum now is the release of the ovulation is the release of an ovum from an ovary. So again, let's go again. So the menstrual cycle comprises of two main events, ovulation and menstruation. Menstruation is the loss of the uterus lining from the body. Ovulation is the release of an ovum from the ovary. And menstruation usually occurs 14 days after ovulation. All right, let's talk about the cycle is now controlled by four hormones. And the four hormones is controlled by the luteinizing hormone, the progesterone, the estrogen, and the follicle stimulating hormone, which is the FSH. So the FSH is secreted by the pituitary gland at the beginning of the cycle. Then it stimulates a Graafian follicle to develop in an ovary and an ovum to mature inside the follicle. Then the FSH stimulates the Graafian follicle to produce estrogen. Then after the production of the estrogen, estrogen is produced by the Graafian follicle, mainly through the second week of the cycle. Then estrogen stimulates the uterus line to thicken and the blood supply to increase after menstruation. Estrogen causes the pituitary gland to stop secreting FSH and to secrete luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone is secreted by the pituitary gland in the middle of the cycle. A sudden rise in the LH in luteinizing hormone causes ovulation to take place. LH stimulates the corpus luteum to develop in the ovary and secrete progesterone. Then progesterone is produced by corpus luteum during the third week of the cycle. And then progesterone causes the uterus line to increase slightly in thickness and remain thick. So basically, I urge you guys to know the process of the menstrual cycle, know about the hormones. So you know the four hormones: the follicle stimulating hormone, the estrogen, the luteinizing hormone, and the progesterone. The FSH is one that happens first by the pituitary gland. The estrogen is the one that happens second in the second week of the cycle. The luteinizing hormone is the one that happens third, and the is the one that happened a little bit after this estrogen in basically the middle of the cycle. The progesterone happens in the third week, close to the end of the cycle. All right, so let's talk about when bringing the sperm and the ova together. So guess what? So when the male and female become sexually excited, the blood spaces in the penis fill with blood. The penis become erect and is placed in the female's vagina. And then guess what? The semen composed of sperm and secretions from the seminal vessels and prostate gland is ejaculated into the top of the vagina by muscular contractions of the tubules of the epidermis and the sperm ducts. The sperm swim through the cervix and the uterus into the oviducts. And then we have something called from fertilization to birth. What happens? So if an ovum is present in one of the oviduct, one sperm enters, leaving its tail outside. Fertilization membrane immediately develops around the ovum to prevent other sperm from entering, and the nuclei of the ovum and sperm fuse to form a zygote. So next thing is that the main important term. What is implantation? So implantation is basically when the zygote repeatedly divide by mitosis using yolk stored in the original ovum as a source of nourishment. Again, so basically, the process that takes place is now the form a balls of cells called the embryo, which moves down the oviducts and sink into the uterus lining. So when a ball of cells called the when a ball of cells called the embryo moves down the oviduct and sink into the uterus lining. This is called implantation. So as then, what we know about first, what happened is that the zygote divide by mitosis, then the yolk now store in the original ovum as a source of nourishment. Then a ball of cells called the embryo, it moves down the oviduct and it sinks into the uterus lining, and this is implantation. So in other words, implantation is when a ball of cells, or when a ball of cells is formed, which is called the embryo, moves down the oviduct and sinks into the uterus lining. So now we're going down and saying food and oxygen diffuse from the mother's blood into the embryo, and carbon dioxide and waste diffuse back into the mother's blood. Now we have the pregnancy and development. So when you talk about pregnancy and development, the most important terms you have is you have the placenta, you have the umbilical cord, you have the umbilical vein, you have the arteries. So the cells of the embryo continue to divide, and some of the cells develop in the placenta. Then after you have the placenta, you have the embryo is joined to the placenta by the umbilical cord, which has an umbilical artery and umbilical vein running through. Then the placenta, the function of the placenta is it allow the exchange of materials between the mother's blood and the embryo's blood. So the function of the placenta, it allows the mother's blood, it allows the exchange of materials between the mother's blood and the embryo's blood. The development of a human embryo or fetus. So in 7 to 10 days, we have a whole of ball cell that is implanted in the uterus lining. Then in 4 weeks, you have the brain and the eyes starts to develop with the nervous, digestive, and the respiratory systems. Then in the 8 weeks, we have the embryo has distinct human appearance. All the vital organs has been formed with limb, fingers, and toes are developed. Then we have in 10 weeks, the embryo is now a fetus, means that the external genital organs are starting to appear. In 11 to 38 weeks, the fetus continues to grow and the organs continue to develop and mature. At 38 weeks, the birth occurs. All right, so the effects of pregnancy on the menstrual cycle. So if fertilization takes place, the corpus luteum remains in the ovary and it secretes excreting amounts of progesterone. Again, if fertilization takes place, the corpus luteum remains in the ovary and it secretes increasing amounts of progesterone. Now, methods of birth control, contraception, very, 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 very important. So we have abstinence, we have withdrawal, we have the redeem method, we have the spermicides, we have condom, and we have contraceptive pill, we sterilize, surgical sterilization, we have intrauterine device, we have diaphragm. And what are some? This is very, very, very important. So how the method works? So for abstinence, you're refraining from sexual intercourse. For advantage, it is completely effective, protects against sexual transmitted disease. Disadvantage relies on self-control from both partners. Withdrawal, penis is drawn before ejaculation. Advantage, no artificial device needs to be used for pills taken, therefore it is acceptable to all religious groups. Disadvantage, very unreliable since some semen is released before ejaculation, relies on self-control. Redeem method, intercourse is restricted to times when ova should be absent from the oviducts. No artificial device needs to be used or pills taken, therefore it is acceptable to all religious groups. Unreliable since the time of ovulation can vary. Restrict the time when intercourse can occur. Unsuitable for women with an irregular menstrual cycle. Then we have spermicides, creams, jellies, or foams inserted into the vagina before intercourse. It kills sperm. Spermicides can be like the pills that you take and so forth. And it is like easy to use, readily available. Disadvantage, not reliable if used alone, should be used with a condom or diaphragm, may cause irritation or an allergic reaction. Condom, a latex or rubber polyurethane sheet placed over the erect penis or into the vagina before intercourse, act as a barrier to prevent sperm entering the female body. Advantage, very reliable if used correctly, easy to use, readily available, protects against sexual transmitted infections. Disadvantage, may reduce sensitivity, so interferes with enjoyment. Condoms can tear, allowing sperm to enter the vagina. Latex may cause an allergic reaction. Diaphragm, a dome-shaped latex rubber, this inserted into the cervix before intercourse, should be used with a spermicide, act as barrier to prevent sperm entering the uterus. Advantage, this is fairly reliable if used correctly, not felt, therefore does not interfere with enjoyment. Easy to use once the female is taught. Then it must be left in place for 6 hours after intercourse, as well as but no longer than 24 hours. Latex may cause an allergic reaction, may slip out of place if not fitted properly. Intrauterine device, a T-shaped plastic device usually containing copper or progesterone inserted into the uterus by a doctor. Then it prevents sperm reaching the ova or prevents implantation. Very reliable. Once fitted, no further action is required except an annual checkup. No need to think further about contraception. Few, if any, side effects. Must be inserted by a medical practitioner. May cause menstruation to be heavier, longer, or more painful. Contraceptive pill. A hormone pill taken daily which contains estrogen and progesterone or progesterone only, prevents ovulation, makes cervical mucus thicker and more difficult for sperm to swim through. Almost totally removable if taken daily. Menstruation is lighter, shorter, and less painful. Disadvantage, ceases to be effective if one pill is missed. May cause side effects in women, especially those who smoke. Surgical sterilization. The sperm ducts or oviducts are surgically cut and tied up. Prevents the male body or ova passing down the oviducts. Advantage, totally reliable. No need to think further about contraception. No artificial device needs to be used or pills taken. Disadvantage, usually irreversible. So what is the importance of birth control? So birth control basically prevents unintended pregnancy. That's one. It decreases health risks to women and maternal deaths. It also decreases the infant deaths and improves the health and overall care of infants by enabling women to increase the space between births. It enables family size to be limited so each child is provided for emotionally, physically, and educationally by having frequent contact with parents. It enables women to participate fully in society and advance in workplace by allowing them to plan for their future and invest in their careers. So, importance of birth control again, we can say it enable you women for social, economic, and financial development. It reduces the family size. It helps to it decrease the deaths and improve the health and overall care of infants, as well as it prevent unintended pregnancy. So, sexual transmitted disease, we have AIDS, we have gonorrhea, AIDS and sex. All right, so the implication of HIV or AIDS. So there's no vaccine or cure for AIDS, as well as the continual spread of HIV or AIDS can has a variety of consequences, including shortening life expectancies, job loss resulting in loss of earnings, increased expenditure for medical care, and an increased strain on health services, discrimination, neglect by relatives and friends, parentless children, decreased standards of living. One moment. Alright, so flowering plants produce flowers for sexual reproduction. So how does this occur? So basically, the flower consists of an expanded stem tip, the receptacle, which basically it has like modified leaves known as the sepals, the petals, the stamen, and one or more carpels in the center. What is pollination? So pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anthers to the stigma of flowers. Anther is the male reproductive system of a plant. So pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of flowers, and stigma is the female reproductive system of a plant. Alright, so next. Alright, so there are two types of pollination. Pollination usually there are self-pollination and cross-pollination. So self-pollination usually occur when a pollen grain is transferred from an anther to a sigma of the same flower, or to a stigma of another flower on the same plant. So self-pollination occurs when a pollen grain is transferred from an anther to a stigma of the same flower, or to a stigma of another flower on the same plant. Cross-pollination now occurs when a pollen grain is transferred from an anther of a flower on one plant to a stigma of a flower on a different plant of the same species. So again, self-pollination is when a pollen grain is transferred from an anther to a stigma of the same flower, or the stigma of another flower on the same plant. Cross-pollination occurs when a pollen grain is transferred from an anther of a flower on one plant to a stigma of a flower on a different plant of the same species. Alright, so in seed development of a plant, each ovule develops into a seed, and the zygote divides by mitosis, forming the embryo, which develops into three parts: the plumule, which is the embryonic shoot, the radicle, which is the embryonic root, or the cotyledon, or the cotyledon. So we have something called endosperm remains in endospermic seed. For example, maize, which is corn, or castor oil. So yeah, plumule, embryonic shoot, radicle, embryonic root, one cotyledon or two cotyledon. Then we have fruit development. So after fertilization, the ovary wall develops into a fruit. A fruit contains one or more seeds. The number, so in order to know if something is a fruit, it must contain seed. The number depends on the number of ovules in the original ovary that were fertilized. The shape and the structure of many fruits is very similar to the original ovary. The stigma, style, stamens, and petal wither and drop off. The sepals may drop off or they may remain. Example in eggplant. So the fruits protect the developing seeds and they help to disperse seeds. The wall of the fruit is known as the pericarp. So the wall of the fruit is known as the pericarp. The exocarp is the outer layer. The mesocarp is the middle layer. The endocarp is the inner layer. So the pericarp is the wall of the fruit. Exocarp, outer layer. Mesocarp, middle layer. Endocarp, inner layer. There are two main types of fruits. We have succulent fruits, which is fleshy fruits, or we have dry fruits. Next chapter is chapter 15, which is disease. So, what is a disease? A disease is a condition that impairs the normal functioning of cells, tissues, or organs, and it leads to the health of an organism being damaged. Then we have types of disease. We have a pathogenic disease, we have a deficiency disease, you have hereditary disease, and you have physiological disease. What is a pathogenic disease? So, pathogenic disease is also known as is basically disease that is caused by microscopic organisms, not so known as pathogens. So basically, pathogenic diseases are